Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to our April edition of the College-Wide Town Hall. We have two agenda items today, starting with a presentation about shared governance, and secondarily, a presentation about our name change implementation. So we are, of course, recording, and we're going to go ahead and, in order to let the presenters have the ability, unless there is something different we'd like to do this time, but I'm gonna turn off our chat and our microphones so you can present, and then when it comes time for Q&A, we'll open it all back up so that you can take questions, as long as that's good with everyone. So go ahead and do that. And the floor is yours, Paul and Keisha.
All right, wonderful. Well, I will begin with the share. All right, so Dr. Samuels and myself are going to be presenting shared governance, the next phase. I'd like to begin with a quote from our own president. Shared governance is really great until it comes time to share. Dr. Samuels will now explain just a little bit about what we've achieved, and we will then continue with our philosophy definition and then a vision of the future.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for your time this terrific Thursday. Just want to share a few of the accomplishments of the Shared Governance Committee. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to those who have committed to the work and those who have been diligent in facilitating the work that we have accomplished. So just over the last 18 months, we have accomplished a great deal from the beginning of us just coming together and being organized in a succinct, systematic, consistent manner. We have met consistently for every 3 to 4 weeks for the past almost 2 years in trying to do this work. Some of the things that we were able to accomplish was being able to divide the outcomes, the things that we wanted to do, the goals of this into subcommittees. And so we had 3 subcommittees that were developed: our communications subcommittee, our philosophy subcommittee, and the subcommittee that actually helps to identify the governing bodies or groups that are amongst Thomas Nelson. And so we have been very successful in identifying a common language for shared governance. Actually, what is it? So when we begin talking about it, and I know that for some of you, you've heard this over and over and over again, but that's how we're trying to make sure that we all understand and have a common foundation of what shared governance is. So we have established a common language for shared governance. We've established a philosophy so that others outside of Thomas Nelson, as well as our family members within Thomas Nelson, understand exactly what shared governance is. We've also been very successful with identifying all of the governing groups that fall under a perspective of vice president or director, and identifying individuals, faculty and staff members to work within those areas to ensure that our policies and our procedures are being executed appropriately. We have also partnered with other constituency groups on various initiatives that we have done. We've partnered with social justice and societal change. We are partnering with mid-level managers. We've partnered with CSSA. We've partnered with Student Government Association. We've also had the opportunity to share in a more intimate setting with all of these constituency groups to ensure that their needs are being met and they are being heard as well. So Paul, I'm gonna hand the baton back to you to share more detail about actually the philosophy.
Wonderful. So one of the first things we did was define a philosophy. The philosophy of shared governance recognizes the ideals of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, which form the pillars of the One Virginia Plan, and indeed all such efforts to promote the value and dignity of all human beings. It endeavors to articulate the need to move away from the selfish and self-serving paradigm that has dominated the major societies worldwide. It endeavors to move towards one in which diversity is appreciated for the richness it brings, equity is demanded to improve the conditions of the formerly underserved, and inclusion is promoted to ensure that the interests of all are taken into consideration throughout the decision-making process.
As we shared previously, that there are common language or definitions, if you will, just what shared governance is. So there are a few key words that I just want to make sure that we pull out when we talk about what shared governance is. So that idea of communication, that idea of collaboration, that idea of consistency that occurs throughout all of our constituency groups and throughout the Thomas Nelson Becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College. And so diversity, making sure that we are diverse in everything that we do, and from our representation on committees to, executing different initiatives. But these are just a few key words. I won't read this to you because you can see it here on the slide, but I just wanted to pull out some key words that we, the committee, worked really, really hard on. It seems like an easy task, but it really was not, to come up with a definition that we felt was representative of who we are as Thomas Nelson moving to become Virginia Peninsula Community College. So, and the last part, I will put emphasis on, the goal of this process is to affirm honesty, integrity, and transparency. So that is critical. That is critical in the work that we're doing and in the work that is forthcoming. So just wanted to lay this out for you in just a very simple way, but it has major power as we move forth with what it is that we're doing. So other contributions that we have made, we touched on this briefly just a few moments ago in our Monday meetups, being present at our Monday meetups, developing a shared governance user guide to be used for professional development. And we have an example of how that has evolved. We are planning a mid-level managers training. We're planning a training with mid-level managers, in conjunction with human resources. So we are trying to be stewards of what we are trying to put out there. We're trying to model that as well. And so when we look at the user guide or the toolkit or the toolbox, whatever nice term you want to use. But essentially what we're trying to do is to provide a model for how others might be able to do the same things within their groups. Paul?
Mm-hmm. So this is my, and at least one other person's favorite slide. It is an axiomatic fact that if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. And the idea behind this, of course, is that in order for changes to occur, there needs to be a new vision, new goals, new direction. And sometimes the new direction takes a new paradigm. And the definition and philosophy that we presented, and indeed the practices that we promote in practicing shared governance, really aims to create a culture of caring, just like the signs say. A culture where individual has the freedoms. We have the 8 freedoms. The first one is the freedom to speak the truth without fear or favor. The freedom to be wrong. The freedom to be open to ideas that we never considered ourselves. There are other tools as well that we'll be getting to in a moment. One of the goals actually is addresses the concerns that came up in recent studies. One of the chronic persistent goals is poor communication. Another persistent problem is the imbalance or perceived imbalance in the decision-making process. And by that, I mean, there have been many, many occasions where decisions have been made and individuals have been asked to implement those changes without any warning. And anytime a decision is going to be made that impacts others, it's very important that at the very, very least, the individuals who are going to be impacted are at least informed that there is a process underway for a decision to be made in a particular area. And another concern is a lack of, some people call it policy, but it's this systematic process for problem solving. It's very important that we have a systematic process for problem solving that is repeatable and reliable. This way, it can be efficient. Changes can occur in an efficient manner and an equitable manner. A lot of the impetus comes from a book called Think Again by author Adam Grant. It's an absolutely wonderful book, and we did see quotes of it in the initial Monday meetup. And what we endeavored to do today, and we've only got about another 20 minutes left, we want to look at a very high level conceptual framework for a paradigm which endeavors to address these persistent problems. And what we hope to do is get an agreement on, in principle, of this paradigm, of this plan. So the ultimate goal is to empower both administration and constituency group members from all areas of service to initiate improvements in the areas with which they are the most familiar. Now, before we continue, I should say, and I think Keisha will verify, that even our understanding of what shared governance was changed and evolved throughout the entire process of our meeting, through the entire 18 months. And one of the distinctions that became quite clear is that administration is a structure and shared governance is a process. And shared governance is not an infringement on the hierarchical structure of administration. It is not. Shared governance is a process which aids in providing to administration the information necessary to make the best decisions based upon the broadest body of knowledge from the greatest number of perspectives. So this is really, really key. Now, administration is primarily concerned with policy, and the constituency group members are involved primarily with the execution of procedures, of doing things. In a chat with Ms. Badgley earlier, she said that the Great Ideas Portal, which is probably like the initial great idea, has received about 60 entries, and they are primarily from constituency group members who have concerns about the way things are being done. And that's not a surprise, because we've lost a lot of faculty and staff, and everybody is filling in for everybody else. Everybody is stretched out very thinly. Everybody's doing 3 jobs. And so, of course, things aren't functioning as smoothly and effectively as they can. But what this model endeavors to do is to provide the voice to the boots on the ground to say, look, things can be done a lot better, and I think this is how they can be done better. And then administration can be consulted. Well, actually, that's later. And that's where the initiation of the change of procedures can begin. All right, Keisha?
Okay, so thank you, Paul. So our proposed model will definitely enable changes of policy to be initiated and provide that mechanism for the guidance from affected constituency groups. So what Paul just laid out for you is that for the changes in practice to be initiated by the constituency group members performing the task and provide a mechanism for guidance from administration. So you will shortly see a graphic that was developed to help drive this home, to provide an additional level of context to what it is that we are proposing with shared governance.
And also the changes for practice can be initiated by the constituency groups performing the task, and then provides the mechanism for administration to guide.
Yes, essentially the Shared Governance Committee will provide professional development, which we have been doing and we will continue to do. to ensure that there is a common understanding of what shared governance is and how it is to be implemented, but also to what shared governance is not. So I do want to also make sure that, yes, we want to hear all of our colleagues. We want to hear you. We want to hear, when things are not going as expected. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be that everything that's going wrong, oh, that's not shared governance. Oh, that's not shared governance. So we want to make sure that we understand, and that is why we keep trying to say, verbalize, show you in a graphic what shared governance is, what we propose that it should be here at Thomas Nelson Becoming VPCC. Where am I? Okay, essentially shared governance committee will, so we talked about the professional development, be that neutral ground, okay? So we are not here to hurt or harm anyone. We are not here to point a finger, blame anything. The ultimate goal here is for effective communication, collaboration, and consistency in all that we do. So we really want to drive that home for everyone. We understand that there's a level of negotiation that goes on in everything that happens within our community college. But at the same time, there's a reason why we have administration and we have the president and the president's cabinet. And there's a reason why we have other constituency groups. So understanding that the same respect that we would give cabinet is the same respect that we would give any of the other constituency groups. And so we want to be that neutral ground where we hear and understanding that there's negotiation always that will have to occur, but that goes back to the communication. If we're communicating effectively, no, everyone's not going to always receive what it is that they want, but we have heard you and we have attempted to make the best decision that's not for one group, but are we aligning ourselves with policy? Are we aligning ourselves with our strategic plan? Are we aligning ourselves with our vision? Are we aligning ourselves with our mission? And so that is the goal: communication, consistency, and collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Keisha.
You're welcome.
And this is a very, very simple graphic. And the role, as was explained, of shared governance is not to solve the problems, but the role of shared governance is, in a sense, to be an information source and also to provide guidance as individuals become more and more proficient in practicing shared governance. It is a very different model. It is a very different model than the model that most people typically have functioned under. The idea is that administration drives the changes in policy. Those changes in policy would be actually communicated to the shared governance so that we would know, oh, these are the policies that are under consideration for change. Cool. We can post that so that everybody knows that, well, for example, the policy on how we hire adjuncts is being considered for change. So instead of that policy, the problem being identified, seeing it's a bad, big problem and a change being made without the consultation, and then all of a sudden the policy changes and everybody's caught off guard, that could be communicated to everybody so that when a change is identified or publicized, it's not a surprise to anyone. At New Horizons, I attended a whole afternoon of trauma-informed training. I really recognized a lot when I saw that. And one of the things the trauma will do is it will make people defensive. And the best way to alleviate a defensive environment is to create a loving and nurturing environment and take away, what just happened? Sorry. And take away that fear because the environment is no longer perceived to be a hostile one. So shared governance, above all, is actually the neutral ground and I want to say peacemakers, but I'm not sure that that's the right term. Also, the governance committees, a lot of work will continue there, but their advances will be communicated to shared governance. Constituency group member proposals for change in practices can be communicated to shared governance, and then a mechanism whereby those can be communicated to administration, so administration can say, oh no, we can't do that because of this and this and this and this. Then that's what the collaboration and negotiation that Keisha was talking about can come into play. We can negotiate and communicate and come to a general consensus as to how we can meet the needs of the majority of the people. Any questions about that before we continue? We're about halfway through the slides. Okay.
We do have a question.
Oh, okay. I didn't see a question. Question.
Sally, Ms. Schaffner.
The question I had is on your picture.
Mm-hmm.
The middle block called that you've labeled shared governance. Is that the shared governance committee or is that something else?
What we envision is that, yes, this is the shared governance committee, but the committee itself, and this is a new departure, the committee itself isn't a committee to solve individual problems, because the changes in policy will be driven by administration, the changes in practice driven by the constituency groups, and the governance committees will continue their work. What the shared governance will do is it will, in fact, that's on the next slide. So let me come up the next slide. The triple role is collaboration, communication, and consistency. That's what we envision the role of the shared governance committee to do. So we will continue to develop the best practices for practicing of shared governance, like the freedoms, like the decision-making process, like the collaborative consultation document that kind of outlines what it means to communicate, and so forth. It will also, as I mentioned, be the communication hub. So instead of receiving dozens of email messages from different individuals telling you what each individual committee and group is doing, the Shared Governance Committee will have publications like, this is what we envision, publications like a bi-weekly publication that says, okay, news from administration, and then a list of all the policies that are being considered for change. News from constituency groups, we could list the different constituency groups, the initiatives and the programs that each constituency group has identified as being an area for need for change, need for improvement. And in that way, everyone can read what's going on, and the actual membership of the ad hoc committees that work on these little initiatives, these little projects to improve policies or improve practices, can actually gain support and I guess publicity by being identified and published in this almost like a newsletter sort of thing. Does that sort of answer your question, Sally? Sort of. The new role of shared governance will form the hub, serving as a conduit for collaborative decision-making, the one-stop communication shop for relaying of information, and provide guidance to ensure the principles of shared governance are maintained. This committee will also serve to address inconsistencies in collaboration, communication, and application of the principles of shared governance. Would you like to speak on what that last sentence relates to, Keisha? Because I think you have a really good handle on what it means to addressing the inconsistencies.
So what we want to do again is to make sure that we are driving home collaboration, communication, and consistency. So when we look at this, we all could have a dozen examples of the inconsistencies that have occurred with either a collaboration that was supposed to occur or a communication that was miscommunicated or undercommunicated or overcommunicated, and how that impacts all of us. It impacts all of us. So when we look at what we want our role to be, not only do you look at what you foresee the goal will be, but you also look at the unintended consequences, as you may say, sometimes that come about as we proceed with our work. And so we wanted to have a statement in here that addresses that yes, we recognize that things do not always go as smoothly. I think we can all think of an example where something was either communicated or the way that it was communicated was not the way that it was intended to be communicated, or not the way that it was received, how I received it. And I'm just using me as an example. But we wanted to make sure that that was captured for everybody as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you. Now this will be, it has been and will continue to be an ever evolving process, which will require many, many hands to execute. And one of the things that this meeting endeavors to do is actually solicit membership to the new to be formed Shared Governance Committee. We are coming to an end of the 2021-2022 year. We're going to be starting the 2022-2023 year. And we do want very, very much to have broad representation from all of the constituency groups. One of the criticisms that I heard about the Shared Governance Committee over this past year was that, well, I wasn't a member of it. I don't know anything about it. And so this is your opportunity to become a member of the Shared Governance Committee. Now, what will that entail? Well, it will entail attending of meetings, but it will also, just as it was last time, entail basically breaking up into small groups to tackle individual initiatives and develop individual, for example, tools for how to promote shared governance within the college community. Or it could be individual members within the Shared Governance Committee who happen to have a vested interest in one of the proposals that's being made will say, ooh, I want to be on that committee. I can be the Shared Governance Committee member representative in the committee that is endeavoring to, redesign some area that is in need of redesign. We will all.
I'm sorry, Paul.
No,
yeah, I just wanted to. I know that we are coming up on our time here, but I just wanted to say, a recommendation that has come, and that this is the reason why we do this. So, a recommendation that has recently bubbled to the top was the actual use of the word constituents. And because words matter. Instead of, possibly looking at something like stakeholders instead of constituents. But we understand that all of our language has been that of constituents from the VCCS on down. And so these are the types of things that we welcome. We welcome this discussion, that if there's an issue, because, it is true that words matter, representation matters. It's very true. And so these are the types of things. And so I do appreciate that recommendation that, constituencies sometimes can have a negative connotation and a political connotation. And that is, we're trying so far to get away from that. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And this was just a perfect example of how words matter. Stacy, I see that you have your hand.
Hi, Keisha. So I just had a quick question, and I maybe I'm not alone. I feel like if I'm asking this question, maybe other people have this question too. So I guess for me, it's a little bit of a challenge. You guys are you've got these big ideas, and we're talking about the theoretical, and I guess I just need it to be a little more concrete for me to understand how this would work, right? I saw the chart, I saw the graph, I'm hearing what you're saying about this. Could I get a concrete example of how this would work differently, right? How is it different than the way it has been? And just as for example, Paul brought up the example of, and this is one that, hit home for me, for example, the adjunct hiring, right? I was kind of in on that when it happened. And I guess, as I understand it, there is a policy. We were not adhering to that policy according to HR when it came to adjunct hiring. And so the changes were made, and then we were kind of asked to, department chairs and anyone else who was involved were asked to kind of conform to this new hiring policy. How would, if it's not too much, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
Nope.
That's one that hit home to me, and maybe CSSA has something else that hit home for them, but that's one that hit home for me. How would this policy that you're proposing, how would this change, this fundamental change, paradigm shift, how would that have been dealt with differently based on that, based on what you're proposing?
I'll take that one, if you don't mind, Keisha. So as soon as the problem with hiring of adjuncts had arisen, and I believe it came up in cabinet, that would be communicated to the Shared Governance Committee saying, look, we've got a real problem with the way adjuncts are being hired. And so this would be communicated from the Shared Governance Committee to the department heads, the ones who typically have been responsible for hiring of adjuncts, and say, look, there's going to be discussion on revisions to the way in which adjuncts are being hired. And so one of two things would happen. Either those individuals would be involved directly with the administration and human resources. And by the way, one of the persistent problems is silofication, is people functioning within silos. And people function within silos sometimes because they're just too darn busy to communicate. But some people function in silos also because they don't want to share. They want to maintain the sole control over the particular area in which they are charged and responsible for, which is understandable. That is a paradigm. That's a paradigm, but shared governance, it's a paradigm that's in contradistinction to shared governance, which is open and transparent. And so, yes, it was a persistent problem, but the rectification of that would be more collaborative, and the decision would have been arrived at through mutually agreed terms, as opposed to having been decided by HR or the cabinet or whoever did the decision, whoever made the decision, and then imposed upon the department heads. And this is another thing, is that in trauma-informed scenarios, people are already a little bit skittish. And as soon as something happens to reinforce their belief that things aren't functioning as they should, then it really does have a traumatic effect on the individuals. And we want to remove that. We want to create an environment where there are no surprises. If somebody's going to be making a decision and the first thing they say is, gee, there's going to be some people who don't like this, well, that's the first clue to say, well, then maybe we should have these people in the discussion when we make the decision, so that we can make that, oh, they're not going to like it, at least understandable to them, or mitigate it as much as possible. So that's an example, Stacy, of how shared governance could have made that process a little bit smoother. We've got one more little, I see Sally's, but we have one more little slide, little point here, and this is the last slide. In addition to the many hands, volunteer hands, we will require broad input from all of the stakeholders. Thank you, Keisha. The participation of some key individuals, though, across administration, faculty, staff, and students will be vigorously sought. In other words, in order for this to work, it will be necessary for certain members of our college community to be actively involved within shared governance for many reasons. One, to contribute from their lofty perspective, from their unique and learned and experienced perspective, to guide the direction of this new committee, this newly forming committee. And also so that it's more clearly understood across the different groups of stakeholders what the perspectives are from administration, from mid-level managers, from human resources, from the student perspective. So it's a lofty, lofty, lofty goal. But if we agree that this is collaborative decision-making is in the best interest for the morale and the progress of our institution, then it behooves us to stand up and be a part of that process. Because as was stated before, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And it's only through introducing a new vision, a new model, and by having the brilliant contributions of the many, many, many talented people we have on our campus, will we be able to fulfill that goal.
So, Paul, I would like to, that is the end of our presentation, but I would like to just kind of bring it home. We are a few minutes over our allotted time. And Sally, I do recognize your hand is up. And so, but I do want to bring home what it is that we are asking in plain terms, okay? Plain terms, communication, collaboration, consistency. We are also looking for members to be a part of shared governance. I have been honored to lead this process for the past 18 or so months. I will be stepping aside, and we are looking, we are asking, we have put this ask out to the committee a couple months ago. I reiterated it again last month. I am not stepping away from shared governance. I just will not be leading shared governance. I am one who believes that leadership needs to shift from time to time. You need to welcome new ideas. You need to welcome new perspectives. So I will always be involved with shared governance because shared governance is one of my loves. I love for us to be able to work together in an effective, professional, tactful manner. So we are asking that you consider, if you have ideas, if you have things that you feel that you're passionate about, and everybody on this talk today, everybody at this meeting today falls in a constituency group. Okay, I know that word is not well received, but for the time of where we are now, everybody falls into a constituency group. And so if you fall within a constituency group, hopefully you will step forth and you will be able to share what your gifts are, what your talents are, or at least speak to the leadership of your constituency groups. So we are asking that you embrace the ideas of communication, collaboration, and consistency, and consider being a part of shared governance and the leadership as we move forward. Sally, I saw that you had your hand up. Is there something that we could address for you quickly?
Not right now. Since your time is up, I will get with you guys later and ask about it.
Okay, please, welcome. This will be recorded, so the chat, if there are specific questions for shared governance, please put them in the chat, and we would be, as a committee, we would be happy to address those.
And Dr. Brandon has her hand up.
Yes.
Please.
I just quickly, something Professor Schneider said just resonated with me. One, I think as the group continues to work, concretizing, right, what shared governance looks like how you use it, how how it actually works in practice, I think is going to be some of the work that the group continues to do. So I want to encourage the current and continuing members and new members to think about, right, how do we make it work? How do we get it from less theory to more practice? The other thing that I think is going to be important for this group to think about when it comes to, and I'm thinking about the example of adjunct hiring, right? Or whatever hiring. The example used was, we realized we were doing it the wrong way, right? In my opinion, that's not a matter of shared governance. If you're doing something the wrong way, you have to stop it. Right? So even though you've enjoyed doing it and you've done it for a while and you've enjoyed it and the outcomes, we can't allow you to continue to do things inappropriately just because you've always done it that way, and to stop it would impact, right? And it has, right? And the hiring is, and there's plenty of examples, right? I promise you, once a month since I've been here, I've come up with one of those, oh my gosh, why are we doing it that way? And you just have to stop it. right? Some of it's a violation of VCCS policy, state policy. We have federal violations here. It just has to stop, right? That's not a matter that we're going to surface to the masses and say, hey, how would you like us to address these violations that have been going on, right? But for me, I think that's something that you have to think about, because that's real for Thomas Nelson. That is happening all over the college. And it's not, for me, that's not a matter. It may feel like shared governance, but it's not, right? If you're violating rules, especially if you're violating laws, that's not a shared governance issue. That's a stop it now. Stop it now, right? What shared governance may be is how you move forward, how you correct. But I want to bring that up because there's some of us compliance people who I see shaking your heads. I get the legal notifications, right? The folks who you see shaking your heads on our screen, right? We get the legal documentation, we get the visits from the Department of Education and the office. We have to deal with that. So for me, that's not a matter of shared governance. You will stop it now. So I need you to discuss that, because these are things that you believe are normal. Because I know you're not all breaking the law because you're lawbreakers, right? It's because there's things that have been done incorrectly that have become normalized and you think it's right, but it's not. And we have to stop it because it's wrong. And so I want you to understand that there are things like that where we're not going to take a lot of time and engage the masses and all the constituency groups, right? We're going to communicate it. We're going to tell you to stop it. And where we may need some shared governance is how do we get back on the right? But I want you to think about that as you do this work, because there are things that have come up as, oh, that is or isn't shared governance. And the truth is it should never have been done. It was allowed. And those of us who are now responsible for it, the folks shaking their heads, if you can see the folks shaking their heads right now, these are all the federal compliance people. Mm-hmm. And we have become aware of things that many of you think are normal, and it's not. And so, but I want to share that because that's not shared governance, even if it feels like it. But I want this group to think about, what do you expect the leadership to do when we come across a boo-boo or a no-no, right, that we need to handle quickly? And I would love to hear some feedback, and not today, but as you do this, continue to doing that work, I want you to be able to share with us, tell us how you want to be notified or informed that something terrible was identified and we need you to stop it. Even if you think it's beneficial to you, it's not to the college and we need to stop it. So I bring that up because like the hiring and certain things, right? We're a state system. We deal with federal dollars. There's rules and regulations we have to follow. And we're not going to not follow them because other people have benefited from them or feel comfortable with them. And I have to be that transparent. But what we can use your help with is identifying, how do we get that news to you, right? How do we help you understand? And then how do we help you figure out a workaround to get done what you had been doing with ease? And it seems like we're throwing a monkey wrench in seamless business practices, but what we're doing is actually correcting the things that we should not have been doing. So I wanted to share that because a lot of what I found here is just things we should not have been doing, but they became normalized. And many people think that it's correct, and it's just not.
Dr.
So
Brown,
think about how we get that in front. Think about how we communicate that to you versus just saying, we're ripping the rug out from under you, which is what we did. But for those of us who have to deal with the attorneys, we're not going to tell the attorneys, give us a moment while we gather the shared governance committee to think this through, right? That's not what we're going to do. So you have to help us understand. We're still going to pull the rug out from under you. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and we're going to stop it. But I need you to help us understand, like, how would you like that communicated? Who should get the communication? And then who should be part of like the replanning?
No, that's right. And yeah, there are, the other part of shared governance also is that there are going to be situations, as you say, Dr. Brannon, that have to be addressed immediately. And that's the other part of it, is that through the shared governance committee, that could be the vehicle to communicate the why things had to be changed the way they were changed. And that would go a long ways, because a formal notification with justifications for the decision will stop all of the rumors and complaints and all of that stuff. So that's a huge thing. And that's another part of our role too. Like I said, peacekeepers, not just peacekeepers, but just harmony builders. Maybe we're harmony builders like that. JJ? Oh, Ada, I think JJ is.
There we go. You got it. I was just wondering if y'all had a composition of this committee. You know, is there X number of people? Are there X standing seats? Like, it seems like the leadership of each constituency group should have an automatic seat on this committee. You know, like the president of the faculty senate, president of the CSSA. You know, so are there positions that are already pre-designated, and then there's a number of other volunteers? Or
you want to take that one, Keisha?
Sure. So thank you, JJ. And that has come up, and we have addressed it in Faculty Senate. So initially, when this was comprised, and I met with Dr. Brandon, I don't think she had been here a month, and I met with her in regards to shared governance. One of the things that we discussed was I was very adamant about making sure that we had representation from every constituency group, even a board member from the board, everybody. I was just very persistent about that. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that anybody who wanted to serve could serve. So it was put out to anybody who wanted to serve. And the committee is comprised of individuals from every constituency group. I heard your concern, JJ. I brought it to the committee. I invited the Faculty Senate president. She was unable to attend the meetings because it conflicts with her teaching time. So the whole purpose of having individuals from every constituency group is that when you go back to your constituency group, hopefully you're sharing the work that is being done, and you're bringing that information or questions that you have from your constituency group back to the Shared Governance Committee. We meet for 90 minutes, sometimes 95, sometimes 100 minutes every 3 weeks. And there's always an opportunity to put that information out and bring that information back in. But that has been brought up to the committee. I understand your position or your advocacy for having these standing members present. And again, that's something that as we continue to evolve, that will be looked at. Please remember, shared governance is fluid. It's fluid. It's ever changing. It's fluid. So thank you, JJ. And Ada, I'm sorry. I know we've gone over. I know we've gone over. I'm sorry. So if there are additional questions, please put them in the chat or reach out to myself or any of the other members on shared governance.
It is okay. Doris and Michelle and I are going to talk about name change, but we actually chatted earlier today about how important this conversation was, and that if we needed to kind of break off and either have another town hall or do a recording and send it out, we could do that. So we don't want to cut off the good conversation. I actually raised my hand because I wanted to ask a question. Looking at your model, and I don't think that this was your intention, but this is how I'm sort of reading it, and this is the concern it's causing in my heart. I don't have a staff that reports to me here, but I have had that in the past. And one of the things that was most important to me was working with them to talk about that every single one of us has an important role and an important job. They're just different, right? And so me as the director of whatever, and you as the coordinator of whatever, we all do something important that moves the institution forward. And my concern, and again, maybe it's just the graphics, so I have to think about it more, but my concern is that the way that I view that is having this shared governance group to say, if I'm concerned about the way that a policy is being implemented or the procedure that we have, I should be able to go through my chain, through my team, through my department to say, this is not working for me. And we need to think about how to change it. And that relationship is really important, that a team can have that conversation and have that dialogue and work on problems. And I'm concerned about how this model might interfere with the important relationship that needs to happen, as well as just opening those other doors, right? So if I need to go, quote unquote, if I need to go through shared governance to have a conversation with someone about something that I don't think is working well, shouldn't we just be able to go right to them and say, hey, this isn't working?
Of course.
I just wonder about that. I guess I'm wondering if we're making a structure that maybe doesn't get at what we're really trying to do, which is to create more dialogue amongst all of us, right? So, and again, maybe it's just the graphic image. So I apologize if I'm like fixating on that, but I think that what I love what you're trying to do, and I love what we're trying to do in terms of opening the communication and creating consistency and allowing for that good feedback. I'm just wondering how we create that flow without having like a committee in the middle to do it.
So thank you so much for that question. And to be honest with you, that question that you raised and the way in which it was raised is precisely some of the dynamics that we had within our committee at the beginning, because it is a very novel and complex thing to get your head around. And to be perfectly honest with you, and this also speaks to Dr. Brandon's point, is that shared governance does not have to have its fingers in everything. That's not its purpose at all. Its role is to ensure that first of all, everybody is aware of what is expected in terms of civil discourse and what it means to truly respect those individuals who answer to you, and what it means to truly respect those supervisors to whom you answer. It's actually to alleviate the obstacles that sometimes are built just because of the way we envision things to be. I mean, I know in a hierarchical structure, people don't always feel comfortable expressing honestly and openly concerns that they have to the people to whom they answer, because they don't want to feel the possibility of repercussions. And so if there's already that pleasant, happy dynamic taking place within your organizational unit, fantastic. You don't even need us. You don't even need us. And we'd be happy for you to do it on your own, please. But if it's not functioning, and trust me, you might think it's functioning really, really well, but other people in your organization may not think it's functioning that well. Trust me, I was a principal of a small elementary school when I was very young and very bad at administrating. And so I know from my own experience that one can have an idea of how well things are going, and that idea may be just completely off base. So what this shared governance in the middle is that neutral ground where we don't pick sides. We don't pick sides. We want for everybody to be successful. We want for everybody to get along. We want for nobody to be victimized or feel as though they're being victimized or taken advantage of. That's what motivates us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what motivates us. And so if everybody on this call and everybody in the college is motivated by the same thing, then sure, there are going to be differences in terms of how we think things should be done or how things could be done best and most effectively, efficiently, and so on. But I think we can all agree that nothing should be done that brings harm. Or if it's inevitable, brings the least amount of harm. And at the very least, gives everybody the opportunity to have their perspective heard, give people the dignity and the respect of being called to the table, to have their piece heard and considered in the decision-making process. And maybe that idea is infeasible. Maybe this idea is infeasible. Well, convince me it is, and I'll drop it. So thank you. And I hope that addresses your genuine concern.
I see that that Jasmine and Ted Tweel both have your hands up. So we'd like to attempt to answer your questions. I don't know which one came up first, but I don't know.
Jasmine, please.
I had Ted first, so I unmuted it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jasmine.
It's actually in order on the side. Sorry. So I two kind of questions that are somewhat related. First of all, is this shared governance supposed to function like the small state or large state plan. In other words, are we supposed to have equal representation based upon the population within a constituency group, as in the U.S. representatives, House representatives, or more of a Senate-like structure, where you just have one representative based upon that particular committee. And that goes along the lines of making policies or decisions within that group itself. And then if any kind of policies or decisions are made or heard by that shared governance committee, what's to stop any kind of superior from just making an executive decision to negate that? In other words, at some point, it may become moot unless rules are redefined in superior positions.
Okay. So, well, first of all, representation by numbers, I don't think is valid. One individual can be a stronger advocate and representative than an entire battalion of people from a different stakeholding group. As was answered JJ's question, no, we don't have a specific set number or anything like that. And primarily, there's two things to motivate people to join. One, they can see, they can identify with the vision and want to contribute to growing this ideal. And two, because their attendance, their presence is integral because of the role that they hold within the institution. And the whole idea of, yes, you're talking about the hierarchical and, so shared governance. Well, shared governance isn't going to be doing any policies other than what shared governance is and how shared governance is going to be implemented. Thus, shared governance role in the policy and practices. That's it. And those will also be made according to the rules of shared governance in collaboration with administration and members of the constituency groups, which are all going to be represented within that shared governance committee. So the other thing too is that one of the roles of shared governance is to provide that transparency. And so, shady things happen in the dark. That's why it's shady. It requires dark to happen. So if everything is transparent, I mean, everything that's allowed to be shared is transparent, then there's less likelihood of that sort of thing happening. Does that help out? Keisha, do you have anything to add?
Jasmine?
Well, hi. I think you guys kind of tipped on my question because I wanted to speak right now about managing expectation. We talked about trauma already in the workplace and things to that nature. And of course, I love this idea. I love, the thought behind it. And then what comes to mind is that we have so much work to do. How do we prioritize what this particular group is allowed it to do, right? And without things falling into the cracks, and then people think they're not heard again, and hey, I'm not gonna raise my voice or present anything again because the last time I did it, nothing ever happens, right? So how do we manage that expectation of, hey, this is what we're going to work towards to make sure that this is what we're working on? And then, of course, communicate that back out to the college, like, hey, is it a communication template? Like, hey, these are the things that the shared governance was working on this month, so that people know that, you're heard, you're acknowledged, and that trauma does not continue.
Thank you, Jasmine. That was a great question. And so my response to that would be that just this right here, this is something that was born out of the Shared Governance Committee, raising concerns that came from their constituency groups. And so one of the things that we've talked about over the last 2 meetings in shared governance is, what are our next steps? What will be our defining work that we do? What will be our deliverables that we will focus on? And one of the main things that keeps coming up is, when we have policies either that don't work, or we have policies that are not even there, or we have policies that are outdated, that are no longer applicable to who we are currently. And so that kept coming up. And so that was one of the things that we said as a group, is this something that we want to focus on? Understanding that we don't create policy. We don't create policy. So what is the best manner in which we can do that? And so that's where the ideas of the 3 C's came from. So you are exactly right. So that we're not. So we've talked about our website. We've talked about Ian Taylor did a wonderful proposal. He did a proposal to extended cabinet about kind of a repository of where you would keep this information and how it would be housed, how it would be communicated out, what's the web presence of what it is that would be communicated. Ian made that presentation to extended cabinet, as well as that presentation to us in shared governance up for discussion. So we are hearing you that it's one thing for us to be working on it, but if we're working on it and that's not being communicated out, or what's coming to us is not being communicated out, we're essentially doing the same thing that we've been doing, expecting the same results. And so that cannot happen. And so that is essentially what this is. But I just want to be very clear that this what we have presented today, this was not done in a silo. This was not done. This was a contribution of ideas that have risen over the last couple of months that we've been working as shared governance.
And that's the other thing too, is that in addition to Ian Taylor's, it's more of a technological method of raising concerns. There's also the Great Ideas Portal. And the Great Ideas Portal is a portal that is open to all individuals where they can express their concerns. Now, the thing is that the way that I've envisioned shared governance preventing that situation from taking place is that if you raise a concern, then that concern will be brought to a committee, and that committee will, and you yourself as the raiser of the concern, will be able to come to the committee and make your case as to why this should be pursued, like why this is such a big problem. And that way you will have the support of the Shared Governance Committee in your pursuit of the resolution of the problem. Then you, as the one that has the concern, can say, well, in order to solve this, I need these resources and these people to work with me to come up with a workable solution. And then the communication to administration or across the stakeholder groups can be facilitated by shared governance, or the committee itself that's working on that particular issue could itself consist of representation from all of the affected levels of the administrative structure. So you would raise the problem, and you would have the support of the Shared Governance Committee to say, yeah, this is something that's really a concern and that should be pursued, and then be given the resources to work on it.
Well, thank you, Paul. I just say that because I know that opening this door sometimes can feel overwhelming, right? Because I could probably think of 15 things I want you know what I'm saying? And so if I could think of 15 to 20, I'm quite sure everyone here could think of. So how do we prioritize to make sure that we are listening, but also that we are not overwhelming the committee so they're not unproductive? And so I just want to see kind of, do you guys know what that looks like? If not, that's something that could be worked on. That was just kind of my thoughts on that.
Under construction. It's under construction, which is a good reason for you to become a member of this committee. And by the way, we should have a mechanism for people to, Dr. Brannon, could I impose upon you?
I was going to say, Robert has his hand up, and I don't want to, he has to get his turn, but I honestly, I wanted to say something, and I was thinking about it, but your point about Jasmine being a member of this committee, I wanted to share. Ada said something that resonated with me, and then your response also resonated, Paul, because I definitely think we need shared governance. I don't want shared governance, though, to be in place of leadership, accountability, and responsibility, right? And I know it won't be, right? But because we need it, we definitely need to have shared governance. But the reason I said I wanted to say something now, because as the leaders, right, you should have expectations of us, right? That we are communicative, right? That we are objective, that we don't play favorites, that certain people have our ears and others don't. So Paul, when you said Some people may think that the communication's going well or that their voices, and others feel like they don't have an outlet. And so they feel like if I don't have this process, I don't have an avenue. And I just want to make sure that we are still, our leadership from mid-level managers, directors to cabinet, deans, and everyone in between, we have to be held accountable for creating the kind of culture and environment where people don't think like, oh, if we don't have this committee, I won't be heard. Because I definitely want shared governance, but I don't want us to reinforce a lack of accountability for the leaders. Anyone who manages humans and whose decisions can impact other humans, we should be held to high standards. And social justice, the shared governance committee is not going to make us do that. We have to make sure that we hold each other to the highest standards. And so, Jasmine, I think when Paul said you should be on this committee, I think having someone from HR, right, who's responsible for the behaviors of the people, especially the leaders, I think we can't get away from leadership in all of its forms and all of its layers. We have to be responsible to you in ways where I would hate to think that you had to go to this committee because you couldn't come to me. But if my behavior is such that you can't come to me, then dang it, I want you to have the committee. But I wanted to say that because, Jasmine, I think there's some relevance to someone from HR being here, because I don't want this to take the place of responsibility and accountability for those who are in leadership positions. Okay, now I'm going to zip it and turn it back over to Robert.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Brandon. I appreciate what you just said, because you touched on some of the thoughts that I have as well. I hear a lot of this discussion building another bureaucracy, and I don't like bureaucracy. I'm a business person, and I believe in the KISS principle, keep it simple. And so I have some concerns along that line, because fundamentally, the more actors you get involved in a decision-making process, the slower the decision-making process becomes. And if we want to be responsible to our customers, our constituents, we have to speed up the decision-making process, not slow it down. We have to focus that process in ways that are beneficial to the institutional mission and goals and aspirations. We have to focus it in terms of what's best in the best interests of our customers and our students. There are some things around the edges that I can see maybe having some way to reconcile might be helpful. But here, bureaucracy is not it. More bureaucracy is not it. I'm thinking about bureaucracy in terms of, not bureaucracy, but I'm thinking about a goal of making the institution more effective, making it more efficient, making it more customer friendly, making it drive towards excellence, but not just bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. This idea of, well, let's look at a policy and see if it's good. That's why I mentioned to Keisha that the word constituency is a word that makes me stumble and choke, because that's a political reference. We should be talking about empowering units, empowering these, pushing decision-making down in a way that gets closer to the students and responding to the students, not pushing it up the ladder.
No, that's precisely what this endeavors to do. Precisely what it endeavors to do.
That's not what I'm hearing.
Well,
you may want to do that, but that's not what I'm hearing.
Okay.
You know, stakeholders are
Robert, I'm nominating you for the committee, by the way.
Oh, no.
Thanks, Bob. I love working with you, Bob. I love working with you, Bob. No.
It's exactly why I don't know.
Yeah, the consultant, maybe like once a month. No, I agree. I have to say, and for those of us who make decisions regularly, right? And I looked at your name. I was like, of course he's from business, right? We're a business. We are in the business of education. You don't have to agree with me, but if you get a paycheck and benefits, we're a business. And so when you're a business, you have to be able to make decisions quickly. And so you're not incorrect. Shared governance can't delay the business, because that's often sometimes what happens when something feels top down. It's sort of like, well, no, you just took too long to come to a decision, so it was made for you, right? And that you may not like the way that feels, but we have to figure out also, again, we don't need more red tape. Right? A lot of the things that were mentioned here, I heard it. It sounds like when we talked about Senate. Have you seen the way our Senate operates? No, that's not the, I don't want to look like that, right? We have to be nimble, right? We have to be flexible, but it can't turn into something like we can't debate every decision for months at a time. So I do agree that, you know, it has to be, we have to figure out shared governance, but again, the business of the college is the business of the college. And those who have raised their hand to say, I want to take on shared governance, shared problem solving, shared decision making, you also need to do it at the pace in which it needs to be done, right? And so that's something to think about, right? As those of you who are going to volunteer for this, we don't have months and months and months to come up, not this institution, not us, and not in the 21st century. So I agree with you, Robert. You don't have to volunteer, but maybe you can be a consultant.
I hate bureaucracies as well. Trust me, I hate bureaucracies. And once again, the Shared Governance Committee isn't involved in the decision-making process of policies. That's we're behind the scenes to ensure that the way in which the decisions are being made is in an equitable and inclusive way.
Well, let me tease that a little bit, Paul.
Okay.
To achieve that goal, in my mind, we need to change this word constituents to stakeholders. And if the administration is consulting stakeholders, those who are most affected by the decision, if they're consulting those who are most affected by the decision, that's all that needs to happen.
Sure. Yeah. Really. That's the second step in the decision-making process. One, identify the problem. Two, identify those most impacted by the decision. It's already written down.
Go no further. It doesn't need to go any further.
Well,
the rest of it is advisory. The rest of it is advisory, because if that stakeholder is not harmed by that decision, that stakeholder is on board with that decision. The rest of us just getting information. Really. And now we can talk about information flow.
That's what follows. That's what follows. I'll share with you. I'll share the document with you.
Okay. I'm done.
Jerry had her hand up next.
Yep, I did. This is just my quarter's worth with inflation these days. But I think too many times we talk about constituents and we talk about stakeholders. I think there's maybe an unspoken dividing line between the faculty and administrators and classified and P14s. I'm on this committee, and I have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed being on the committee, and I have felt that my opinions, good or bad, have been honored and taken at face value. And I would encourage the classified and P14 to become involved. I mean, sure, we have the CSSA, but that's just one step and one small process that's used. So I would encourage the classified and P14 to become more involved in this. I mean, this is a really worthwhile committee to be involved with. I mean, when I first joined, Stephen nominated me for the position. It was like, I wasn't sure going in what I was going to come up with, but I'll tell you what, I've learned a lot, and I've earned a new respect for my stakeholder colleagues. And I think this is really a dynamic group, and I think there's a long way to go yet, as Paul says, but this is something that's going to be definitely worthwhile, and it's definitely going to put the college on the forward path.
And the value that you got out of being on the committee, we received in your contributions to the committee. And I'm not just stroking you, that is the truth. And to be honest, this is one thing that I think Keisha masterfully did. She embodied and promoted and ensured that the principles of shared governance, as we were developing them, became implemented immediately within our committee itself. And now what that means, Geraldine, is that when you are in meetings, you are going to know when shared governance is taking place and when it's not. And you should be empowered to speak up when you feel as though it's not. And with the existence of this committee, it will provide basically like that repertoire of that body of knowledge, those practices and procedures for collaborative decision-making. that you can rely on to say, you see, this is what shared governance is, and that's not what shared governance is. Now, not that people are doing it intentionally, it's a new thing. New things take time to learn. No one's going to jump all over you and say, oh, you're not doing shared governance. It's like, okay, so this is, you might want to consider this. This is how things will be able to run more smoothly. Wow.
Did we have any other questions as we're sort of, I know we've already gone over our 1 hour time, but I don't want to cut off the good conversation. I think we're good. Okay, gotten the, let's cut off. So we did have an intention to talk to you about the name change implementation, but we are going to table that and reschedule another town hall so that we can present. Of course, we will record it and we will send it out if you're not able to make it, because I don't think it will be as exciting as this shared governance. Hopefully not as controversial potentially, but definitely some good information that we'd like to share with everyone about where we're at and where we're headed, and the process that we've taken to get there. So we will be sending that link out very, very soon, and we will meet back here at some point next week so that we can share that information. And thank you so much for everyone's attendance. Have a great evening.
Thank you.